All right, so it is 2 o'clock. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today for our Mastering Excel Tips and Tricks Part 2. I am Rachel Duvall, the VCAP Assistant Coordinator here at the Association. As I mentioned in the Part 1 session, I am not an Excel professional, but I am a professional that uses Excel every day, and I have been for about a decade now. So today I'll be sharing some more tricks that I've discovered throughout the years. I'm going to turn my video off just to keep my internet stable, and I'll go ahead and share my screen. Can everyone see this?
We can see it, Rachel.
Thanks, Blair. All right, a couple of housekeeping items as people are entering. Please be sure that your microphone is muted, and this session will be recorded and shared afterwards, just like the first session. If you have questions or would like me to repeat a step, the ladies of the association will be managing the chat, and we will get to your questions if we have time today. But again, I love helping with Excel questions, so please feel free to reach out. My email is on the screen now. As I've said before, I really do learn something new every time someone asks a question, so I certainly appreciate them. I feel very honored to learn alongside incredible district staff and leadership and partners. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. We did have a question last time about what version of Excel I'm using. So just as a note, this is Microsoft 365 version 2406. Here's the build. This is the most recent version and the most current build. I think it became available earlier this month. Okay, so diving right in, we ended our first session with VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. So if you recall, VLOOKUP is used to search for specific data within a table or a range, and it works by looking up a value in the first column of a table, and then it returns a corresponding value from the same row in a specified column. So I want to build a new table here, and I have my old table here, or my reference table here. Here we have contract numbers, BMP type, the extent of the BMP, the cost share affiliated with this contract, and then the inspection date. So just as a quick reminder, if we wanted to find the cost share affiliated with this contract number, 0217053, we would say VLOOKUP, and we would say we want to find this contract number in this table. I'm hitting Control and Shift and pressed the over key or the right arrow and then down to select the whole table. And we want to find the cost share affiliated with that contract. So we want to look in column 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to type a 4 here. And we're going to say false because we want Excel to return an exact value. Perfect. If you recall from the first session, we talked about absolute and relative cell references. So you can toggle between absolute and relative with the F4 key. That's F as in Frank 4. It's at the top of your keyboard. You can click that and toggle through different absolute settings. So for this one, I want to lock the rows because I'm just going to wait for this plus to show up and double click, fill that in. Cool. So that was just a refresher from the first class. HLOOKUP, it does the same exact thing, but instead of searching vertically in columns, it searches horizontally in rows, which kind of makes sense. What I prefer to use instead is actually XLOOKUP. So XLOOKUP is very flexible because it combines the best features of those two. It searches for specific values in a range, and it returns a corresponding value from the same row or column. So it searches horizontally and vertically. If you notice, I've been typing in formulas either in the cell itself, or I'll come up here to this formula bar, but you don't have to do that. So if you're uncomfortable with Excel's syntax, you can click this button right here, which says Insert Function. Here, you can type the function you want to find. So I want to find XLOOKUP, hit Enter. You can see it's right here. I'll go ahead and double click this. This is kind of like a GUI that you can use, or a user interface that walks you through the formula. So here you can see these are the parts of the formula that are required for it to function properly. And then over here, these are the types of cell entries or data entries it's expecting to see in each of those things. If you need more help on it, you can always click this Help on this function button. And that probably pulled. You probably can't see this. Can you guys see this Microsoft XLOOKUP function?
We can see the function arguments box. Rachel.
Ah, okay, sorry. Let me do this real quick. Here you go. So when you click that little button at the bottom, it will take you to the Microsoft kind of official syntax of the formula. You could see this is the formula right here. Just a note, as you're working in Excel, you'll notice that some arguments don't have brackets and some arguments do have brackets. Arguments that do not have brackets are required, and you can see that here. Any argument that has brackets around it is actually optional, so you don't need it to use the formula. Okay, so let me close this and make sure that you can see my Excel screen again. Yes.
Yep, we've got your Excel screen.
Awesome, thanks, Blair. So let's build the formula in this instead of typing it in. As I do this, you can see up here in the formula bar that it will start to type in everything that I would normally type in myself. So for the lookup value, we want to say, I want to find this contract. Okay, and I want to find this contract in this column. All right. And I want you to return from our table, I want you to return the cost share. All right, and then we can click here to see the formula again. You see the rest of the entries are actually brackets, so we don't actually need that. I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. You'll see it actually gives us the same value as it should. Here I can go back and hit that F4 key to lock the rows. Perfect, and we can drag this one down. So in this example, these two are the same VLOOKUP and XLOOKUP function in the same way, but it comes in handy for different types of data tables. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hide this just so less stuff is on the screen. Let's say you want to find all of the, or you want to know the total amount of cost share that was obligated per program year, but you don't really want to add unnecessary columns or extra confusion to your spreadsheet. So what we do know is that in these contract numbers, the center number right here, I'll highlight it, that number is representative of the program year. So instead of adding extra stuff, we can just utilize that feature of the contract number. So here we're going to use SUMIF, and we're going to say, look in the column of contracts. Okay, and I want you to look in the column of contracts for -16, since we're looking at program year 16 right now. Dash, so look for that. And if you find that, return the cost share and sum it up. Okay, so that's it. And it's a 0. It's a 0 because there is no cell in the A column of our contracts that is exactly -16 dash. There's other stuff in front of it and before it. So we're going to tell Excel that, yes, there's stuff before this, and yes, there's stuff after this. And we do that with an asterisk. Once that asterisk is there, you're basically telling Excel, yep, there's some other stuff around this number, but if this number is visible, I want you to sum it up. All right. So that is our total cost cost share obligated for program year 2016 based on the contract number. Now we can easily toggle this to lock the columns now using that F4 key again. All right, just hit enter there. Now I can drag it over this way and you can see my references didn't shift, and all we have to do here is update the program year that we're looking for. So let's put 17, 18, 19, and 20. Awesome. Okay. So let's say there's TA affiliated with each one of these contracts, and we want to know how much TA was done or was paid out with or per program year. Okay, so we'll do something very similar, but this time we'll just use what we used in our last session, COUNTIF. And actually, before I type that, I'm just going to go ahead and steal this portion of the formula so I don't have to type it again. So I'll hit equals COUNTIF parenthesis. I'm going to paste that portion that we already built. And I'm just going to close the parenthesis here. And let's say our TA payment was $1,200 per contract. I'm going to multiply it with an asterisk and hit 1,200. And there you go. And same deal for this. You can pull this over since the columns are locked, and you can just update the program years that you're looking for. Now, if you, all right, I just realized I cannot type these numbers while talking. If you don't mind adding another column to your data set here, you can also utilize flash fill. So if you start typing in the pattern that you want, so this contract is 17, this is 17, so also PY 17, the next one is PY 16. There are hundreds of entries here, so that would, take a really long time. But once you type a couple of those, you can actually hit Control E, and it will flash fill the rest of, it will flash fill using the pattern that you've kind of taught it. So it knows what you're looking at here, and it's saying, all right, I can manage the rest of this. I will say that if there is a typo or anything in your raw data, that flash filling might have an error. So I do advise you kind of peeking through and making sure that everything looks copacetic. Okay. So you can also use this formula for that as well. I'll just copy this, paste this, and instead of looking for -16 now, we can say look for PY 16. Oops, you do have to add an equal sign, and I'm sorry, the phone is ringing. Right. And I've looked away, and now I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, that's why. The reference range here, we're not looking at the contract numbers, so we can pull this actually. I just clicked on it and I'm holding it, and I can actually drag it anywhere I want. So we want to put it to this column now, since that's what our reference range is referring to. Okay, so you can do that for any formula, and this formula would work for SUMIF as well. Okay. Moving right along.
Hey, Rachel.
Yes, ma'am.
You did have a question in the chat that
Yeah.
the question was control what? So I imagine, there you go.
Yes, absolutely. It's control and E. E as in elephant. That's a great question. Thank you. Were there any other questions?
That was all in the chat. That was all that popped up in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you. I'll put this up here so when I share this file, you can remember that. Alrighty. On to the next, potentially the best function in Excel, honestly. It is incredibly powerful, and I would really suggest, if you take nothing from these sessions, exploring some product for your own data sets. So what it does is it essentially transforms your values into a format that allows multiplication between corresponding elements within the range that you specify. And then it sums it up. So it sums up the resulting products of that. Does exactly what it sounds like it does. It sounds redundant, but it actually saves a bunch of space and it saves a bunch of steps. And you could do a lot of different kind of operation or operators within these formulas. But let's say we have some customers here, we have a product, we have a price, and the price actually varies between products. And then we have the quantity that were purchased. And we want to know what the total revenue is. So you could always take your price and then multiply it by the quantity, and you can drag this down and then it will auto sum here. There you go. So you could do that, but this is not a dynamic number. Alternatively, you can use sum product. So what I'll do is equals sum product. Okay. And then I just want to highlight or select the price column, comma, the quantities. And that's it. And there you go. It just does all of that for you. So I feel like it's nifty. Maybe you can use it in some of your own data. It's also useful if you have multiple categories. So you can see if we wanted to know the revenue for different products specifically, we would basically have to do that by hand because each of these particular products, even the same products, they have different price tags. So you can't really count up all the hats and then multiply by a number and then multiply that by the quantity. So you can do all of this together in the same formula. You can say sum product, and we're actually going to add another parenthesis here because we're going to tell it to look through the products. And if the product equals hat, then I want it to be multiplied by the price. And I want that to be multiplied by the quantity. Okay. So there you go. That's your revenue for hats by itself. Now, if we come in here and we lock using F4, again, I'm saying F4 key to the top of your keyboard. So if I come in here and I highlight this and I click the F4 button, I can lock the columns, which is what I want to do. So I'll lock these columns. Perfect. But I will leave this G3 reference for the hats alone because I want to just pull this and get all of my revenue for each product type. So here we go. Since we didn't lock this entry right here, it's relative and therefore it will move over. So here we go. Here are all of our revenues per product type. And if we were to sum this up, just as a double check, it should match our total revenue, and it does. Okay, so that's a simple example, but it is very useful for a lot of different things, and you can really customize that formula or that function as much as you'd like. All right, so slightly changing gears here, we can get into kind of text manipulation. So a lot of the times we'll get, or I don't know, maybe you don't get this, but I get a lot of names that are first and last name in the same column, which is challenging because if I highlight this whole row, which I can't do for some reason, I don't know why. There we go. If I highlight this whole row and I sort by A to Z because I want it alphabetically, I'm sorting by the first name, and I don't want that. I want to sort it by last name alphabetically. So what I do is I highlight this column go to the data tab and you want to hit text to column. You want to make sure it's delimited. And then here we want to unselect tab. We want to select space. Then we can hit the finish button. So that just separated out my first and last name. And now I can select this, right click, sort A to Z. It'll ask if you want to expand the section, and you do, so leave that there and hit sort. And now we are alphabetically organized by last name, which is very nice. So this is a way to kind of separate your data. It works for a bunch of different things, and you can tell it what characters you want the break to be at. So maybe it's a comma, it could be a dash, anything that you want. But very useful for names. So if you want these names together now, because you just got them in alphabetical order, you can use a form of concatenation called text join. So actually we can just use the function builder for this as another example. So here I'll type in text join, hit OK, wonderful. All right, so I want the lookup value, oops. I was gonna say this is not right. Let me do that again, function. I don't want XLOOKUP, I want text join. There we go, that's perfect. So the delimiter, what do I want between my two words? I just want a space. So I'm just going to add a space right there. Ignore empty. This says equals logical, which means there are only two options, true or false. I'm going to tell it true to ignore that. And then I want it to combine the first name, and then the second text I want it to combine is the last name. We'll hit OK. Copy this down. There you go. And now our names are back together as one. You don't have to put them in this order, of course. So text join or other forms of concatenation, you can do maybe the delineation between the two is a comma, and then we'll ignore the blanks. We can put the last name first, then the first name, and there you go. Now it's last name, comma, first name. So these can get as complicated as you want, but they're very useful for sure. Additionally, flash fill works for this as well. So Control and the E key. So I will start typing. Hopefully I spell this right. So that is important. If you type the name out and then hit Control E, it will fill in the rest. I will say that in my experience, flash fill does tend to make mistakes with names, especially if they're like middle names or doctor or Mr., that kind of stuff. But yes, this is nice too, because when I click on this, you can see that it's just text here versus this one, which is actually a formula. All right. So moving on a little bit, let's say these are students in our class. We have 4 classes on these dates, and we want to know the percent attendance because they need a minimum of 75% attendance to pass the class. So I will, mark their attendance here, which is X's, and that's perfectly acceptable here. And we can use just a simple count if formula to do this. So I'll say count if these 4 have an X in it, and then divide it by 4 since we have 4 classes here. Alrighty. Now we can make this look nice. Well, let me pull this down first. Okay, and I can go home and I can make this into a percent. I can make it look nicer, maybe bold, whatever you'd like. This is fine, but what I recommend is making it a little bit more formalized. So I would add checkboxes. Sometimes when multiple people are using your form, sometimes they might say like XX and see COUNTIF doesn't recognize that at all. Or they might say P for present or something, and none of that is counted. So just to keep things more uniform, I would actually suggest coming to Insert tab, hitting checkboxes. Here you can make them, red is a little aggressive, but let's say you want them to be green. Okay. So now you can check these boxes and they look nice. And here you can change your formula. Instead of it looking for an X, you want it to look for true. And just double click that when the plus shows up, and there you go. So checkboxes really do two things. They look cooler, and they also give you Boolean values, which are true, false, which is nice because Excel can understand that kind of uniform Boolean value in other formulas better than something like an X. You can see that here up in the formula tab. When the box is not selected, it's false. When it is selected, it turns to true. Okay. And just kind of as a reminder, if you want to get extra fancy, you can highlight these cells here, go to conditional formatting, insert a new rule. You could say format only cells that contain cell values greater than or equal to, and you can just put in 75% here. Click the format button. I like to fill it with a color so that I can clearly see it. And there you go. Here it highlights our passing students. Alrighty. I'm going to pause for a second. Are there any questions?
You had one in the chat. I'm not sure if we have time to do it right now, but it was to
Okay.
repeat how to split the first and last name into 2 columns.
I can do that right now. I will take this one right here. I'm just going to insert a few cell or columns here. So first and last names together in one column. Click on the column, go to the Data tab, click Text to Column, make sure it's delimited, hit Next. You want to make sure that spaces are selected. Here you can see a little preview of your data where it's going to split. Click the Finish button. All right. Thank you, Blair. Moving on. Okay, so sometimes we have just a bunch of text in Excel. So let's say you have a bunch of addresses, but you really only want the zip code. That's not an issue. So what we can do here is we can say equals, we're going to tell Excel to look from the right, oops, parenthesis. From the right in this cell, I want Excel to look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 digits. All right, so I want Excel to collect the last 5 digits of this text string. That will give us just the zip code, okay? Now, if I drag this down, oh my gosh, some of them are not all 5 values. So what's going on here? These are called trailing spaces or hidden spaces, and they are honestly a data killer. They really affect formulas and they affect things, and they're really challenging to work with because you can't see them. You just can't see them, so you don't know they're there. And this isn't so bad because we only have 12 entries, but if we had 12,000 entries, you can see where this could be problematic. So instead of fixing each of these individually by going in and backspacing, I'm going to trim it. So to trim it, I'm going to say equals trim. Okay. And I'm going to say substitute. Spell that. There we go. Already have a parenthesis there. Select the data that you want to trim. We're going to tell it characters. I'm going to give it 160 because that's plenty. ignore space, empty cells. Go, and I think I have all my parentheses done. There we go. All right, so they don't look, this doesn't look any different, obviously, but if we go back in and do our right, look at this text now and give me the last 5 digits. Does it work? Yes, fantastic. So what this formula is doing in a short version of this is that it is squishing all of the text values together, getting rid of those trailing spaces or those hidden spaces that you can't see, and it's collecting the last 5 characters. So that is an easy way to trim your data to make sure there aren't any funky things going on that may impact your formulas. You can also tell Excel to collect things from the left side and the middle, but we're gonna do left side. You can tell it to find things from the left side until a space, okay? So you can say left, I want everything in this text line, string that's at the left side of this address until the first space. So it's not dependent on the length of characters. So I'm going to say left, look at this data, and you want to find a space in this. And then we're going to tell it -1, which I'm going to be honest, I don't remember exactly. I just know that you do need a -1 of this in this, or it doesn't work. I can look that up and share with you guys later. But that has pulled now everything from the left of the cell of the address until the space. All right. So if you just wanted the building number, it's a good way to do it. There are a lot of methods for extracting text from the center of text strings or sentences, but honestly, it's quite complex and it's very unique to each situation. So we're not going to dive into that today, but to make you aware, typically the easiest one is mid. That's the easiest function to, that's the easiest function to use, but it does get tricky. So I'll just leave that there for you to investigate later. All right, I'm gonna unhide these rows for a second. And this is mainly for my own sanity. I don't know if this happens to you or if it's just me, but sometimes when I copy and paste text from maybe like a PDF or a Word document, the entries end up like this, which is somewhat infuriating and it's not how we want it. And of course, it's not like you can't conditionally format this and you can't use like Form Painter to fix this or Format Painter to fix this. But there is an easy way to fix this. And this also works for maybe you have a list of the same word over and over again. That's not the same word. And there are some spaces maybe before or after. So when you try to center these, they don't line up all the way. That kind of drives me crazy. So what I like to do is highlight everything, hit the Control F key, which pulls up this Find and Replace box. You want to go to Replace, the Replace tab. Here, under the Find What bar, you want to just put a space, which seems very silly, but this changed my life when I found it. Just replace all. And Excel will say, okay, cool, we made 171 replacements. You're welcome. There you go. And that fixed it. Okay. Honestly, that really did change my life. All right, our next task here is to create a search bar. So this is kind of more of a fun thing that you can add. This is nice for data sets that you reference like very, very frequently. Now, obviously, you can use Control F and you can find particular things. So let's say I want to find Chester. It will highlight it and you can look at them this way, but if you want a cooler way, you can insert a search bar. So in order to do this, you do need the developer tab. If you don't see the developer tab up here on your version, not so much version, but in your orientation of Excel, you can add it. So to add the developer tab, you want to click on the File tab. You want to go down here to Options. From Options, you want to go to Customize Ribbon. And here you can see, if you scroll down a little bit, developer is checked on mine. That's why it's visible on my ribbon. But you can go ahead and click that, hit OK, and it will pop up over here, okay? So you do need that. Once you have that, you can come to the developer tab and enter what's happening. Interesting. Can everyone still see my Excel sheet?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. It just froze on my end. I got a little nervous there. Under the developer tab, you want to click Insert and you want to click Text Box. So it's this one right here. Okay, and we're just going to click right here. Let's move it right here for the moment. Okay. So once that's in place, you want to go ahead and right click that search bar that you just created and go to Properties. Now, this is a ton of information that is slightly outside of the scope of this, but we can simply change one thing and get this to work. So I'm going to enter in this linked cell space D2, which is kind of, if you look up here, where I put my search bar in the first place, just kind of as an easy reference. Okay, so that is all you're going to do under linked cell, and you're going to close it. That is it. Don't touch that again. It gets scarier. So I'm going to grab these two headers. I'm going to put them here. Stretch this out a bit. Okay. And now we're going to type in kind of a complicated formula, but it's a pretty cool feature. We're going to filter. All right. And we're going to say filter, one parenthesis, this whole table. So I'm going to hit Control Shift and press the down key. There we go. I've added that entire table. Comma. I'm going to say is number, because it does some fancy calculating gymnastics in the background. I'm going to say parenthesis search. And this is where I'm going to connect that D2 cell that I just linked to my search bar. And now we're going to tell it, I want to be able to search either the county, city. I want to search that and or, so and ampersand. And I'm going to select this. And then you cross your fingers. You want to make sure you close the correct number of parentheses, which I think we leave it to tell it to ignore blanks. Okay, now I think we have the correct number of parentheses. Now you cross your fingers and hope that things work. Fantastic. That worked out very nicely. So now I'm going to go here and I'm going to kind of open my search bar up a little bit just so it looks a little nicer. Maybe here I can insert, I'll come here, merge these cells. I can insert an icon and I can search for search. Click this, hit insert. If you click this button right here, it will force it into the cell. Okay, and the last step of this is to go back to the developer and make sure that you get out of design mode. Okay, so here now you can search by district. You can search by whatever data you put into this, but let's see, Chester, cool. Cool. Very nifty tool. You can also hide these. I have built one of these for districts and their corresponding counties just because it's really easy for me to open this up when people call and they ask which district they should be contacting. So that is a fun one. It's unnecessary, but pretty cool, you gotta admit. All right. Moving on to kind of the more visual side of things. We have, okay, these data are sales reps. So each one of these rows represents an employee ID number 1, 2. So each of these are individual sales representatives. And here are their sales per quarter. So first quarter, second, third, fourth. All right. If we want to see kind of what's going on over this amount of time, we can really quickly do that by inserting lines. So you just select your data range. We want to see what's going on over all 4 quarters. And there you go. I like black lines. And you can pull this down. There you go. So these are actually called spark lines. They're not my favorite, but if you want to look at something really quickly, this is pretty simple. Okay, so that's what's happening over these 4 quarters. Let's say we have the previous year's sales for this sales representative, and this is considered the current year's sales. So I want to know what are his total sales for, or their, sorry, that was wrong. What are their total sales for this year? So I'll hit equals sum. Highlight that. Okay, pull this down. There you go. And I really want to know their progress more than anything else. So I'm going to take the current year. I'm going to subtract the last year. See how things are going, how things went. So you can stop here. That's fine. It's telling you what you need to know. But if you want to get extra fancy, there are a ton of options in the number formatting arena of Excel and the internet, honestly. So here you can create a custom formatting. Now you can find a ton of these on the internet, and I can share some resources of this after this class, but I found this one, for example, that I will show you. So custom, I'm going to type it into here, hit OK, and this is kind of like the stock market style of formatting. So kind of fancy. It's nice if you have reports to share. You can change, obviously, the size of these, bold, etc. And then obviously, if something changes, that will change as well. All of these are dynamic. Okay. I'll just go ahead and put this code here. There you go. This is the code, the custom code to make this. And what's cool is that when you go to your number formatting, it will actually save whatever custom thing that you've entered into this. So that's it right there. You can delete them. You can save them forever and it'll remember it for your next spreadsheet. Okay. So here we go. Another way you can visualize progress without necessarily creating a chart is through progress bars. So let's say you have different projects. Maybe these are buildings, maybe these are who knows what. And you're monitoring the percent completion per month. Okay. So from this year, we want to know, well, from this year, we know that they've completed 44% of the project so far. But it would be nice to visually represent that so we can kind of see how things look. You can use rept, so E-R-P-T, here we go. Rept, and you can tell it you want bars, so that is the straight bar key. And then you can tell it this, and you want it to maintain being a percent. So we'll multiply it by 100. And here you can put bars right next to your data, in line, in cell. You could change the font. I think the font that everyone raves about is Playbill. There you go. And then you can kind of adjust this to make it exactly 100%. Now, of course, if August comes around and things change, then that changes your percent. And it also changes your bar. Okay. So just kind of fun things that you can do. Continue here. All right, so getting into charts. This is showing different BMP types and the quantity of those BMP projects that happened per program year. So what I'm going to do is just highlight these data. I'm going to go to insert, and I'm just going to click this down arrow here, kind of this corner box. And honestly, the recommended charts in Excel are fantastic, usually. So it looks at your data, it's like, this is probably the best way to represent this. And sometimes I agree, and sometimes I don't at all. But you can come in here and change a lot of different things. So you can see we have our program years across the bottom. We have clustered bars based on the project or the practice type, which is color coded, and then the y-axis are our quantities. These are kind of your quick editing bars, I guess. So here we can like change the color. I don't know why it popped up over here. Usually it's over there, but okay. So you can change the color scheme of your graph, anything like that. This one's okay, I guess. You can move your legend to different locations really quickly. So there you go. You can also change your font of your labels, which I highly recommend because for some reason they're really tiny and they're gray naturally or by default in Excel. So you can do that. You can also use the format painter on these, so you can make that easier. You can also format the legend. Okay. You can add grid lines, remove grid lines, all that fun stuff. But this is kind of the basic thing that you would graph in Excel. I don't like the borders around graphs for some reason, so I like to remove that line. I just think it looks cleaner. There you go. So that's a simple one. Here is another example of a bar chart, but it's a little bit different. So here we have BMP types and the amount of cost share in total that has been allocated per project or per BMP type, and then the homeowner share. And I know because these are my data, I'm familiar with them, that these two numbers added together is the total cost. So what I want to show here is kind of the percentage that is cost share versus what the homeowner put in. So I would do something like this, go to charts. I'm going to go to all charts because see the recommended one, I don't like that. I think it's missing the bar. No pun intended. So I'm going to come up here to this one, which is 100% stack bar. Because like I said, I know that these two numbers together equals the total cost. So this is a great way to show that. So here, I'm going to remove this again. This is per practice or per BMP type. I'm going to change the font on this black. There we go. Format Painter, do the same thing here. Format Painter, do the same thing here. I want the legend to be at the top just because I don't like these colors. So I'm going to fill this with my own colors. I'm going to say, that's a nice color. I want the outline to be black and I want it to be pretty thick. Excellent. This side, I'll pick a different color that is complementary. And see, it just selected one of those, but I want it to select all of it or all of the bars. So you can click off of your chart and then click back on and it'll select the entire data range. Here, I'll make this blue outline. You don't remember. That's a little thick. Let's make it a little smaller. Perfect. All right. And one more thing that I would like to add to this graph is a shape. I want to add a line. I want to add a line at 50% just because we want to see what that looks like. If you have trouble drawing lines in Excel and you hold Shift, it will stop you from making it crooked. That's a nice little tip. So I want to highlight the 50% bar right here and why not make it orange? And I really don't care about the rest of the line, so the grid line. And I don't like border lines on my charts, so there we go. That's a nifty way to show these data with a stacked, 100% stacked bar. All right, I have a few more minutes left and we have kind of completely different data to look at. All right, so there are a lot of data entries here. I have the year, I have the month, I have the decimal date. A decimal date is the integer part of the decimal date is the year. The decimal part of the decimal date represents the portion of the year that has passed, just as a note. And I also have atmospheric CO2 in parts per million. Okay, so there are a lot of data here. I do like graphing in decimal date because it gives you a very smooth line. One thing to note, there are a lot of data here and a lot of different dates, not a lot of categorical data, well, zero categorical data except for month and year. So with all of that information, we know that it would probably be best to use a line to represent these data. Maybe a line over time would be best. So what we graphed right now is the decimal date on the x-axis and then the CO2, the atmospheric CO2 in parts per million on the y-axis. This looks pretty horrible, right? It's okay, we can fix it. So let's right click and go to Format Area. And we want to change, let's see, where is the line? All right. The minimum bound for our y-axis is 0. That's way too low. So why don't we make this 300? Okay, cool. And 440 is fine, I guess. We can keep that the same. That's fine. All right. Now for the years, know that this data set started in 1958. So I'm going to make the start year 1955. So we have a nice ending there, and we really don't need it to be this far in the future. There we go, to 2025. We can change the major units here. You can see it's a 10. That means the x-axis is changing by 10 years. That's where the grid line is. We can change this to 5. Add more grids if you want. We can add, I'll do right here. I actually want to change the color because I just don't like it. So I'm going to change this color to gray. There we go. Now I'm not going to worry about the formatting of the axes at the moment, but what I want to draw your attention to is that these data are pretty cool. So we can see that we have kind of a long-term trend, but we also have a smaller trend. So we need to figure out the best way to show these data. What we can do is come over here and add a trend line. There are different options for trend line. I would suggest sticking to this one, just clicking trend line. It's a linear formula. You can go to more options. There are more options. We won't get into that. But you can display the equation and the R squared. R squared is just it's a value that shows the percentage of data that's actually captured by the model. The model is the trend line in this case. So this is saying that 97% of data is captured and represented by this trend line. Okay, so this is starting to look okay. I still hate grid lines personally. Let's move this over here just a little bit. I'm going to unhide this. I have pulled out a specific year. So I'm going to graph month per CO2 now. I'm going to say insert. I'll do the same type of chart. We can fix this one as well. We don't really need to fix the Y. That looks fine. But we can change the x-axis. We know the x-axis here are months. So I can make it start at 1 and end at 12 since there are 12 months in a year. I'm just going to remove these for now, save a little bit of time. And what we can do is make this pretty small. Maybe too small, maybe like that. There we go. I'll move this over here. And I picked 1995. That is my birth year. That is the only reason why. No, I don't really need that either because I really just want to highlight the trend. So I'm going to hold Control and then I'm going to scroll on my mouse and it's going to zoom way in. So 1995, I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. You can make it, well, you know what you can do. You can add a grid line, which I deleted because I don't like them. But you can add a grid line and you can see, okay, 1995. I'm going to put a little box around that. And I'm going to right click this and I'm going to fill. I'm going to say no fill. 1995 starts here. So we're really collecting, maybe we're showing about this. Okay. You can insert a line. And you can make this look nicer than I'm about to, but you can Control C, Control V, add a line there. I've made 2 lines now. You can kind of blow this up. Obviously, you can make this look better. You can select these, change the color, all sorts of fun things. You can change the color of this graph. Oh, sorry, by doing this. There you go, everything kind of matches. I don't like how this looks. We can format this axis and say, I want it to be 1. There you go, our months are back. All right, so now we've kind of shown the long-term trend and a little trend. These data, just for everyone to know, this is the Keeling curve. This is atmospheric CO2 over time. They started monitoring in 1958. These data are really cool because you have, like I said, a very long-term trend, but you also have an annual trend. And it really highlights that the Earth is kind of breathing, like I like to say. So CO2 is at the highest during kind of the northern hemisphere's springtime, and CO2 decreases through the growing season as plants start to photosynthesize more than they're respiring. So the Earth quite literally breathes. So with that, I'm going to stop here. It is almost exactly 3 p.m., so perfect timing. I'm going to stop sharing, get my camera back on. All right, so I will stick around for a few more minutes if you'd like to ask a question, but of course, I'm available via email, no problem. You are welcome to hop off if you've got other things to do. And just thank you. Thank you for everyone coming, and I hope you have a great day.